Hey everyone, time for more of my favorite games. What's happening, Brew Crew? Welcome back to my Top 100 Games of All Time series. This week we're looking at my numbers 80 through 71, so let's get started.
80.
My number 80 is For Sale. I was a little bit tardy to the party for this game, and this is the first year that it's on my top 100. Now, when it comes to bidding games, I don't always like them all, but the ones that I like, I really like. I think this is a very easy game to recommend to people who are looking for a fun, fast-playing filler game that is super easy to teach. The game takes place over 2 phases. In the first phase, you'll be doing typical around-the-table style bidding to purchase property cards, each numbered 1 through 30, with 1 being a cardboard box in an alley and 30 being a space station. Once all of the cards have been auctioned off, you'll go into the second phase, which is a blind bid using the property cards that you won in the first phase to claim the highest dollar values from the market row. At the end, the player with the most money wins. That's about all the rules, and it's nice because you can teach the rules for each phase at the beginning of each phase. Plus, the game plays so quickly that we typically play a few games back to back, and it's one of my go-to fillers.
79.
Number 79 is Wingspan, which I'm sure would be a lot higher on a lot of other people's lists. I've always liked Wingspan, but it's always hovered in the mid-100s for me until this year. I think what gave it the jump was getting the chance to play it with the expansions, Oceania in particular, which I thought added some really cool things. This game is an absolute juggernaut in the board game world, winning all kinds of awards and getting plenty of coverage, even in mainstream media. Odds are, if you're watching this, you don't really need me to tell you about Wingspan. It's a brilliant and beautiful engine building game with a fantastic production. I think Stonemaier really raised the bar with this game. Plus, the gameplay is so smooth that I now take notice anytime I hear anything new designed by Elizabeth Hargrave is coming out. This is one of just 11 games in my top 100 that I don't own yet.
78.
My number 78 is Marvel Dice Throne. I picked this one up last year, and it made my 2022 top 100 at 91. This is one that I think could keep climbing for me the more I play it. I really love how thematic the characters feel in the Marvel version of Dice Throne, and I think that without that IP, it may not have made my top 100. Although I do like Dice Throne's Season 1 and 2, I think they're both very good games. I think I prefer playing this game head-to-head at 2 players, although I have played it multiplayer a few times, and I think it's still good. But I would definitely say that I prefer the free-for-all variant of multiplayer rather than the teams variant. This is a game for me that scratches the same itch as King of Tokyo, but with more meat on the bones. I like King of Tokyo a lot, but we kind of outgrew the complexity level of that game quite a while ago, and for me, Marvel Dice Throne has filled that spot. That said, I don't think this is a difficult game to learn by any means, but it does mean that we have more decisions to make, and it brings it up to a level where I'm more likely to stay engaged in the game.
77.
Number 77 is Venos, which is on the opposite end of the complexity spectrum from the last game. This is my favorite game by Vital Lacerda so far. I've played and enjoyed a few other games of his as well, and I can see that they are beautifully crafted. Unfortunately, they tend to push the complexity level to a point where I have to really be in the mood for some mental gymnastics if I want to play them. I will say that we currently own but have not yet played Lisboa and On Mars. I think Venos, though, sits right at the upper reaches of my comfort zone where I feel pretty confident in playing it without my brain turning to mush. This game has you playing as Portuguese winemakers, and you'll be planting, growing, and aging your wines. You'll also be hiring specialists and farmers to help improve your wine and showing it off in exhibitions. It's a fairly thematic economic Euro. Even though it's not as heavy as some of Lacerda's other games, it definitely has some crunch factor. We also own the deluxe version, which was released in 2016 and has some updated and streamlined rules.
76.
My number 76 is Ankh Gods of Egypt. This one was 24 last year, but dropped quite a bit because of lack of play over the last year. As of right now, though, this is my favorite of the trilogy of Ankh, Rising Sun, and Blood Rage. Now, this may change once I get a chance to play Blood Rage again so that I can compare them again, but I really like how Ankh plays out. It has a very strategic, almost chess-like feel to it as you move your pieces around the board trying to cut off areas of the map to gain control. Like the other games in this series, this one also has some great miniatures. I know the topic that comes up pretty often in the conversation about this game is the merge rule, which is, for all intents and purposes, a player elimination mechanism. I will say that it's not something that I love, but it's also something that doesn't really bother me. It's just something that I need to think about and plan for as a possibility. There is also a scenario which does not use the merge mechanism if you'd prefer to play without it. Personally, I think it's an interesting take on player elimination, and it doesn't force anyone to sit out. And the remaining 95% of the game is amazing.
75.
Number 75 is Wayfarers of the South Tigris. This is its first year on my top 100. So at the time of recording this, we actually just played another game of Wayfarers last night, and now I'm left wondering if it maybe should be a little higher on the list. I will say, hopefully without spoiling anything, that my top 3 of the Garfield Games trilogy games are on this list and the next. So they're all pretty close in terms of their position in my top 100. And they could easily shift around amongst those 3. I will say that I feel like Wayfarers is the smoothest of the heavier games in this series, and I love how you can combo actions on your turn to do some really cool things. I also like how the dice worker placement works in this game, allowing you to essentially upgrade your different faces of your dice or manipulate them in a way that will get you to the more powerful sides of your dice. I also like how the tableau and engine building works in this game, letting you upgrade your actions on your cards, although I will say that, as with most tableau builders, luck of the draw can play a role. So far, my experience, though, is that it hasn't had a huge impact on the outcome of the game. I have yet to play Scholars of the South Tigris, but I'm definitely interested in trying it out.
74.
My number 74 is the second game from Stonemaier on this part of the list, and that's Euphoria, Build a Better Dystopia, which has pretty consistently lived in my high 60s to low 70s. This is one of Stonemaier's earliest games, and still one of my favorites. It has a lot of things that I really like, not the least of which is the humor. This is a dice worker placement game where the higher the die value, the better the rewards you could potentially get, but also the higher the risk because the die value represents a worker's knowledge. If they become too knowledgeable, they become aware that they're living in a dystopia and they will escape. And this is such a great thematic mechanism. You're sending your workers to different locations in the city to gather the materials needed to build up the city, but the locations have names like the Center for Reduced Literacy and the Theater of Revelatory Propaganda. I love the satirical way in which the theme was handled. The game also allows you to bump workers from a space, which is a mechanism that I really like. It means that you can always take a space with an action that you might need, but at the same time, you're giving an opponent back one of their workers, which they can use instead of having to take an action to recall their workers. I like it when a game says, instead of saying no, says yes, but.
7,
That's but with one T.
73.
Number 73 is Brussels 1893, which is a game that I owned for a very long time before we finally played it. In fact, at one point I was considering selling it because we hadn't played it yet. But I'm really glad that we didn't, because this game is really great and it has been slowly creeping up in my rankings. It has some really neat mechanisms that I haven't seen used in many games. For example, there's a worker placement aspect that takes place on an action space board. But at the beginning of each round, the starting player will place a corner piece on the board based on a round card and the player count, and the only action spaces available are the ones that fall within that space sectioned off by that corner piece. On top of that, you are not only competing for action spaces, but you're also bidding on the abilities that are available at the bottom of each column on the action space board. This game also has a really cool way to handle selling different pieces of artwork, where you'll be moving a cursor token around a grid, and where the different colors on the cursor are will determine the price for that particular art type, how much it can be sold for. Plus, it's got a resource wheel that determines what goods will be required to build the different sections of your building. If this sounds like a lot, it is. And I think that's why it took us so long to play it, because it was a little bit intimidating. I will say, though, that once you get the key concepts down, the gameplay is actually pretty smooth. There's a really nice new version coming out from Geek Attitude Games, so if this sounds interesting to you, this would be a good place to jump on board.
72.
My number 72 is another older game that has been in my collection for a very long time, and that's Kingsburg. It's been number 39 last year, 22 in 2021, 35 in 2020, and 23 in 2019. So it's typically settled in the 20s and 30s. It's only dropped this year because it's been a while since my last play. This was one of the first dice worker placement style games that I had ever played, and that's still a mechanism that I get excited about in games. The main concept is that you will roll 3 dice at the beginning of a round and then place those dice out in different combinations to influence different people in the kingdom. They'll give you different resources or abilities that you'll use to build up and defend the city against invaders that will strike at the end of each round. We have the old 2007 edition, along with the To Forge a Realm expansion, which adds a ton of cool new things like bigger player boards, alternate player board rows, events, and characters. If you get the new second edition, it will come with a lot of that content already included, which is great. Personally, I like the look of the 2007 edition better, but that has no impact on how good the game is.
71.
And my final game on this week's list is Mansions of Madness at number 71. There was a time when this game was in my top 10, and I still think it's a fantastic game. This slow decline has more to do with the number of campaign-style games that I have or have played. Now, this game is more episodic in nature than a true campaign, but episodic games tend to suffer from the same issue in my game group, in that we want to try to have the same group play all the way through it if possible, so that everyone can see all of the storylines. All that being said, I would say that this is possibly the most thematic game that I own. It has great exploration and atmosphere, a lot of which is amped up by using the Mansions of Madness app. The addition of the atmospheric music and the sound effects really enhances the experience. This game is typically my go-to when giving recommendations for spooky games to play around Halloween, because the theme and atmosphere are so strong. This is a game that relies pretty heavily on dice rolling to resolve actions, which means that I'm more likely to be a liability in this game rather than an asset. But in games like this, I really don't mind, because At the end of the game, it's all about the story that was told as the game played out. I want a thematic game like this to play out like a movie, and while I try not to die in games, if my character has an epic death battling monsters from beyond space and time, I'm okay with it. Alright everyone, that's it for my favorite games of all time, numbers 80 through 71. Let me know in the comments what you think. And if you've been enjoying this series at all, don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you know when the next video in the series comes out. And until next time, let's get another round for the table.